So blockchain backer has just sold 25% of his portfolio as a bit of a defensive move. Totally valid. I'm all for people protecting assets, capital, and more importantly, taking some profit. But this video is a counter argument of why I do not think we have topped yet. And all the signals that I'm looking for risk on, risk off, and more importantly, where the money is going to come from. But also, if things do go wrong, I'll explain why I will probably de-risk as well. So if you like this sort of content, please do leave a like, subscribe, and more importantly, comment. Do you think the top is in? Let's get over 50 comments. Let's go. We're going to start by going through a couple of receipts, maybe kind of sentiment. Low tourist behavior versus the prior periods, obviously, right? Now, for me, fundamentally, I'll show you my YouTube as well. We are at a very, very low and slow YouTube kind of view count. The subscribers are falling off. There's no real inflow at all. And that is, for me, a justification that I think we are early somewhat in terms of markets don't really top without any mania. And when we look at other markets right now, the S&P, the NASDAQ, gold, whatever, they're all flying, but Bitcoin and cryptocurrency has been relatively slow. There's certain elements around the technical analysis in terms of why dominance is high and all that kind of good stuff kind of gives me the feeling we are not really topped yet. And also, as I alluded to it, we are still at a relatively high dominance point. We haven't really had that final waterfall situation where things just fall off and that rotation has happened. As you can see, we are still at 58%. That's relatively high, unless obviously the whole dynamic of this entire market's changed and that flips because Bitcoin's super powerful. It will kind of counteract the fact of why he sold 25% of his holdings because, wait for it, spoiler alert, he thinks Bitcoin has topped. Kind of ish in a way where we're talking about the obvious in the room. This is the Bitcoin chat. We are still relatively okay in my viewpoint. Okay, for now, we are still holding the EMA. We're still on the high structure timeframes looking okay. Yes, it's a correction away from an all-time high. That's fine. But ultimately, we haven't really thrown the baby out of the bathwater yet, in my opinion. And I think we could go much lower, by the way, and it not being a top because we've seen that before in previous cycles. But in my opinion, if this was a top, I'd be expecting a runaway euphoria and a vertical kind of retail pop-off, which we've seen before in previous cycles and even in previous time periods within this cycle, 2023 into 2024, for example, even end of last year. So yeah, I don't think we're there yet. Let's go back to the rotation map and the spine of it for the obvious reasons here. Bitcoin dominance for alt season and obviously the stable currency dominance is still at that point where we have not ticked that box yet. We haven't had that rotation. Ethereum is pulling back from its pop. That is clear, that is obvious, and it is expected to happen for obvious reasons. Why? Because it's had a big, massive squirt. Now, again, we can talk about the situation of obvious in the room and hindsight. The altcoin side of it in terms of where the liquidity is going. And more importantly, is it actually going into Bitcoin? Well, not really. It's been quite sluggish. And this chart alone is showcasing that. We need to go into those lows below 4%. If we fail from the 5% marks, it could be very, very interesting where we go from there. But more importantly, as I've alluded to it, we need this to drop lower and that would indicate risk on. But right now it is sluggish, I know, and people are getting very frustrated. But for me, that isn't an indication that we've topped at any point, realistically. This needs to go, in my viewpoint, much, much lower because there's a lot of liquidity sitting there that is just on the sidelines, in my viewpoint. And not to mention the fact that the altcoins are still at these lows. So I'd expect a lot more. Honestly, I would. And I think everyone would, personally. But when we can't be caught, in my view, we can't be calling for tops at these lows. If that is the top of the market, something's gone majorly wrong. Whether we blame policy, whether we blame Trump or tariffs or whatever it may be, realistically, it would be a really big problem. But as I say, trading volume, retail, and the FOMO will all come. By the way, there's a link to Blowfin. There's a little bit of a competition going on here for an iPhone if you're interested. Check out the links. You get 20% back on fees, and this is for all existing people. So if you are still a member of this and you want to do it, go for it. Let's go back a little bit. I want to respond to blockchain backers kind of situation here. And the one thing that I talked about just before was sentiment retail. This is my YouTube over the last 90 days, right? If you look at July, it was going up a little bit, but July had actually quite positive price action. And since the summer, we're just gradually just losing subscribers. Why? Well, on inactive accounts, people are not interested. I am focusing more on Bitcoin than altcoins, and people don't like that. I have said some controversial things about alt seasons not being the same, and that's upset people. But that is telling me that this is not a market that's got new liquidity, new people, retail FOMO. Now, I know people disagree with me on certain situations. So let's talk about why I think this could be very interesting. Now, this is the original X quote that I put about taking profit. That's fine. Isn't a weakness, it's survival. Banks don't pay the bills until the cash, right? But the overall post here is quite long. But talking about the likes of the Total 2 and the Russell 2000 breakout and, more of a defensive play, selling 1/3, whatever it may be, or 25% or however much you want to know it as, even 30%, whatever. But make or break, final situations and all that kind of stuff, which is fine. I get it. But realistically, even if this is a defensive play, 25% is fine or 30% is fine. But the reality is here, the analysis that's been done post this post is kind of a bit too much like I'm trying to justify it. And that shouldn't be the situation in my viewpoint. If, for me, as a normal kind of person looking at this from the outside looking in, if you sold 1/3 and there's element of tax reasons within that original post, by the way, and you think there's a warning sign that Bitcoin has topped from the likes of the 2021 cycle, you would sell probably more than 1/3. That's my thought on it. So yes, there's situations here where you can look at momentum indicators, fine. You can look at the loss of structure, yes, kind of. But I think the loss of structure is more key than the momentum lagging indicators, because we've had it in the past before where Bitcoin doesn't really give a shit about all this kind of stuff and it kind of just goes even higher. Even in this current formation, we could actually just squirt to the upside completely, because this divergence has already played out. From there to there, it's already played out. This divergence from here to there could have already played out as per the correction. We do have a hidden bull here. We also have the MACD, which in my viewpoint is very wishy-washy and a bit lagging anyways. Yes, you could argue the stock RSI has already dropped, but it's already at the lows right now. If this is a correctional wave, we've not really dumped much versus hop down here or even the previous cycle. So in my viewpoint, yeah, we may have locally topped. The cycle over? Top? No, definitely not. Over 4.2 million videos about crypto across far too many channels, 410,000 over the last year, right? The skittish crowd effect. I'm going to talk about it because this is where we're seeing a lot of people get very skittish about what people say and reducing that blow-off risk in the future term, because we haven't had that blow-off. We haven't had that euphoria. We haven't had that element. And what I've just seen is throughout the last 2 years, many people just getting shaken out of like moves for no reason because of emotion. I want to see complacency. I want to see euphoria. I want to see, before the top gets bloody called, people doing silly stuff. We've not really seen it. We've not seen people go, oh, Solana's going to go to $2,000 or XRP is going to go to 500 and whatever dollars. We've not seen that stupidity yet. We've seen some stupid things on YouTube, but nothing to the enormity of the past. But the skittish crowd effect is very clear. We've seen it with hype recently with Arthur Hayes selling a part of his bag to buy a Ferrari, for fuck's sake. It's weird. But realistically, there's a lot of people talking about crypto right now, but there's a lot of people talking about crypto in, I think, a very negative way. Even on X, right? X is super negative right now. It's like, what on earth's happened here? But let's talk about my triggers, because I think it's important to know, as much as I love the total 3/BTC chart, it's not the be all and end all, right? We could have a period where Bitcoin just flies off and altcoins don't follow it. That could be hurtful. But realistically, we've got to look at the obvious in the room. Other/BTC is still also very low. We are still in opportunity zone in my viewpoint. But going back to the likes of Bitcoin, for example, here, when we talk about all this kind of stuff and all the random and the gubbins, as I've alluded to, we are still at good levels. But I'm going to say it now. It would not shock me in the slightest, and feel free to bookmark this, if we hit that $102,000 level. Will that mean, oh my God, the market is over? No, definitely not, because we've been lower before and we've also corrected much higher. At the end of the day, we are talking cycles. We are talking the halving side of it. We're talking about Q4 being, normally pretty bullish, and often or not, August and September pretty wishy-washy. And that's just the reality of just Bitcoin alone. Even if you look at the monthly time frame, right? The monthly time frame still looks relatively all right. And my exit points are up here. If we do fail and we don't get anywhere near that, fair enough, we may well be looking to restructure that. But realistically, that is still looking absolutely fine. for me, at the minute. And there is a small divergence up here, but it's a relatively weak one, okay? And it may well actually be overruled at any point in the given period. That's just looking at it from that side of it. The stable currency dominance in terms of like where we are in terms of the trend formation on the monthly time frame, we are still below the EMA 21 at the lows here. It's not nothing crazy. And at the end of the day, yes, if you have made some money in this cycle, I am not saying don't take profit, by the way. I'm saying if you want to take profit, it's not a bad place to do it because you have already made a lot of money here. But my viewpoint is, if you're going to be skittish about it, you should have been skittish probably a few weeks ago or a few months ago when we were much higher and we were settling at that level point. That's the thing. People are getting skittish at the lows instead of the highs, and that's kind of where I'm getting a bit concerned about for obvious reasons. But if, for example, on the monthly time frame, we lose that EMA 21 or we break structure completely on this really, really horrible side of it, yeah, I could argue a lot of things here, but ultimately that would be a clear invalidation. It would look pretty horrible. For me, probably the weekly time frame is more important, but I'm not bothered about the EMA. I'm more bothered about the structure points around this point here. If we lose all of that, it could get pretty naughty. But as I say, that is a 30% correction from the high. It's not massive, certainly when it comes to Bitcoin. But for me and myself only, as much as people hate these sort of things, and myself included, by the way, there's nothing that's really like shouting, oh my God, this is like peak euphoria. This is peak toppage. And we're not going to get everything go green lighting on here, by the way. This is all just random lagging indicators. But for me, if we're talking a couple of months ago, we know that some of these were hitting the green lights, and there was a few. But most of my core holdings is Bitcoin. Most of it is not chasing anything silly or small caps. I'm concentrating on the obvious, right? If you do follow me and you follow me on Patreon, you'll know that I'm doing a dollar cost average challenge. I hold Bitcoin. It's all there. You can see it, the journals and all the extra videos. Feel free to jump in. But what I'm trying to say is, even though we are like looking at end of cycle vibes, if it was euphoric or getting towards that point, these would have a couple of hits, right? 0 hits. 0. But even when these are having the green lights on them or whatever, no one was really selling the tops realistically, for what I've seen anyways. But the fundamentals here, you're never going to time tops, you're never going to time bottoms. I'd rather be a little bit late to it a lot of the time and be profitable than be totally late. My viewpoint is I think a lot of people will miss the top of this cycle. I think a lot of people will sell way before the top as well. People will, as I say, get skittish and probably sell very, very early. Nothing wrong with that. Profit is profit. Profit is king. But the reality is, we're in September. People are getting a bit skittish, as you can imagine. And I don't want people being influenced when realistically the data is saying other things. Emotions play different games on everyone. And as you can imagine, if you're playing with more money, you're going to get that point. But don't try and justify it when realistically, as I say, nothing's happening. Anyways, if you like, please do subscribe and let me know. Have I convinced you as a top not in, or do you think the top is in?